Okay, so picture this. Me, a regular guy, slightly singed around the edges from life's general refusal to just chill for 5 minutes, staring down an HOA president who probably irons her shoelaces, while my dog, my life, my furry four-legged soulmate, is clinging to a cliff face by his toenails. And she's talking about bylaws. That's not even the craziest part. The craziest part involves a Bell 412 helicopter, a rappel line, and the distinct possibility that I was about to make the evening news for all the wrong reasons. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It all started, as most truly terrible days do, with a perfectly lovely morning. The coffee was hitting just right. You know that perfect cup? The one that makes you think, hey, maybe adulting isn't a complete cosmic joke after all. Steam curled up, carrying that rich, dark aroma that's basically hope in a mug. Sunlight, the good kind, not the angry summer glare, was dappling through the oak tree in my backyard, making everything look like a high-definition postcard. Barnaby, my golden retriever. Picture a furry, perpetually optimistic muppet with an IQ of treats, was engaged in his daily, one-sided war with the local squirrel mafia. They'd flick their tails from the fence, chattering insults, and he'd woof back, a fluffy 80-pound cannonball of good intentions and zero coordination, convinced that this time he'd catch one. This, I mumbled into my mug, watching him bounce off the bird bath in a failed aerial assault, is peak suburban bliss. I swear, somewhere in the vast, uncaring cosmos, a bored deity snorted and said, "Hold my ambrosia." My big plan for the day, aside from refereeing the Barnaby versus Squirrel showdown, was to finally install the new bird feeder. It was a sleek, modern number, allegedly squirrel-proof, though I had my doubts. Barnaby, bless his cotton socks, wasn't the only one being taunted. This feeder, however, had already ruffled some feathers, and not the avian kind. Brenda, our esteemed Homeowners Association president, had already dispatched 3 tersely worded emails regarding its potential non-compliance with aesthetic community guidelines, Section 7, subsection D, paragraph. Well, you get the picture. I was pretty sure she had a direct line to a bylaw printer in her brain. I was just unwrapping the feeder, humming a vaguely defiant tune, when Barnaby let out a bark that was less, "I'm chasing a tiny rodent," and more, "Houston, we have a significant fur-related problem." He was over by the far edge of the yard, the part that sloped down towards the nature preserve, a lovely, wild stretch of green that also happened to feature some surprisingly aggressive geology, namely cliffs. Cliffs that were, I'd always thought, adequately fenced off. Or at least marked better than with a few straggly bushes that Barnaby apparently saw as a new, exciting obstacle course. A yelp, a horrible scrabbling sound of claws on loose rock. Then, a sickening silence. The world went slow motion. My coffee cup, the one with the chipped rim that felt just right in my hand, slipped. It hit the patio stones with a dull thud, a dark stain spreading like my rapidly expanding panic. "Barnaby?" My voice was a ragged whisper. I cleared my throat, tried again, louder, sharper, laced with a terror I hadn't felt since I accidentally walked in on my parents. Well, never mind. "Barnaby!" I was moving before I even registered the decision, sprinting across the lawn, the forgotten bird feeder clattering behind me. My heart was a wild bird trapped in my ribs, beating against bone. The edge of the yard, where the manicured grass gave way to untamed undergrowth, was closer than I thought. I skidded to a halt, peering through a gap in the dense foliage. And there he was. About 30 feet down, on a ridiculously narrow ledge of crumbling sandstone, was my dog. My beautiful, goofy, loyal to a fault, golden retriever. He was pressed flat against the rock face, whimpering, his big brown eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. One paw was held awkwardly, and my stomach clenched. Injured, he's injured. "Okay, Barnaby, okay, boy," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, a monumental effort when my insides were churning like a cement mixer full of eels. "Stay, just stay right there, buddy, Daddy's coming." How? How in the ever-loving, blue-eyed world was Daddy coming? I couldn't climb down there. I get dizzy on a stepladder. My wilderness survival skills consisted of knowing how to order pizza from pretty much anywhere with a cell signal. Think, Mike, think, the access gate. The emergency access gate at the end of the cul-de-sac. It led to a rough path down to the base of these smaller bluffs. It was usually unlocked, or at least it used to be, for hikers, for emergencies. Or was that before Brenda, the she-wolf of Section 7, subsection D, had ascended to the HOA throne? My feet were pounding the asphalt of the cul-de-sac before the thought even fully formed. "Gate, gate, gate," I panted, fumbling with my phone, already dialing 911 with a thumb that felt like a particularly uncoordinated sausage. My brain was a frantic mess of worst-case scenarios, each one more horrifying than the last. Barnaby slipping, Barnaby bleeding, Barnaby... No, I couldn't even let that thought finish. Up ahead I saw it, the chain-link fence, the slightly faded sign. Emergency access only, HOA maintained. And usually, just usually, the simple latch that a child could open. But today, oh no, not today. Today there was a padlock. A brand new, gleaming, heavy-duty, screw you Michael and your distressed dog padlock. And standing just beyond it, watering a bed of prize-winning, offensively bright pink petunias, with a look of serene, almost saintly concentration, was Brenda. Her silver perm, a marvel of engineering that probably had its own structural support system, seemed to quiver with righteous indignation as she spotted me. Her eyes, small and sharp behind her gold-rimmed glasses, narrowed. She set down her watering can with a slow, deliberate movement that screamed, "I have all the time in the world, and you, my friend, are about to have a very bad day." "Brenda!" I gasped, skidding to a halt in front of the gate, my chest heaving. "Thank God, Barnaby, he fell, down the cliff, back of my yard. I need to get through the gate. Now!" Brenda finished, meticulously wiping a non-existent speck of dirt from her perfectly manicured thumbnail. She looked up, a slight, pitying smile on her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Michael, good morning to you too." Her voice was calm, infuriatingly so, like a yoga instructor talking someone through a particularly painful stretch. "And which section of the revised June 1st bylaws would that be under? Emergency dog retrieval via unauthorized access of common area perimeters." My jaw, I think, actually dropped. "What? Brenda, are you serious? He's hurt. This is an emergency access gate." I rattled the padlock. It didn't budge. It probably cost more than my last vet bill. "Precisely," she said, nodding sagely, as if I'd just made her point for her. "For authorized emergency personnel, which, unless you've recently completed your certification and submitted the requisite paperwork to the HOA board forms 3B and 7 Alpha, if I recall, you, Michael, are not." She picked an invisible piece of lint from her pristine floral blouse. "Not to mention, this gate is for situations pertaining to human life and critical infrastructure. Your dog's current predicament, while unfortunate," she said, "unfortunate," like she was describing a mild case of indigestion, "is a direct result of, shall we say, less than diligent pet ownership, and it certainly does not supersede Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 9 of the HOA bylaws regarding controlled access points." "You put a new lock on it?" I stared at the gleaming metal. "Why?" "I had that new lock installed yesterday," Brenda announced, a distinct note of pride in her voice. Too many unauthorized recreationalists, according to my motion at the last meeting. Littering, excessive noise, potential damage to the indigenous flora. She gestured vaguely towards a patch of what looked suspiciously like dandelions. The motion passed, by the way, unanimously. A tiny, smug smile. Well, Mrs. Henderson from number 12 abstained, but her cat, Mittens, has been consistently observed digging in my aforementioned prize-winning petunias, so her opinion is frankly suspect and likely biased. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that stupid gate off its hinges with my bare hands. I wanted to launch her prize-winning petunias into low Earth orbit. Instead, I took a deep, shaky breath. Brenda, please, he's my dog. He's like family. He could be seriously hurt. Just open the gate, please. I hated the pleading tone in my voice, but Barnaby was down there. She actually tutted. Michael, rules are the bedrock of a harmonious community. If I make an exception for you, where does it end? Next, it will be Mr. Abernathy wanting to retrieve his errant drone from the protected owl nesting area, or young Timothy Jenkins trying to recover his frisbee of doom, as he calls it, from the sensitive watershed zone. Chaos, Michael. Utter chaos. She picked up her watering can again. I suggest you call animal control. They are, I believe, authorized personnel. The sheer, unadulterated, grade-A Karen of it all was breathtaking. My panic, which had been a roaring inferno, was now mixing with a white-hot rage that made my vision go a little blurry at the edges. Animal control? By the time they navigated the county bureaucracy and figured out which end of a leash to hold, Barnaby could... I couldn't finish that thought either. My 911 call was still, apparently, on hold. The tinny hold music, a truly horrific synthesized version of Fur Elise, was a mocking soundtrack to my despair. Ma'am, I have an emergency. I finally barked into the phone when a human voice replaced the synthesized torture. My dog has fallen down a cliff. He's injured, and the HOA president has locked the emergency access gate and is refusing to open it because of petunias and the sanctity of bylaws. I was vaguely aware of Brenda stiffening beside me, her watering can held like a weapon. The dispatcher's voice was a drone of practiced calm, the kind that probably dealt with people claiming alien abductions on a Tuesday. Sir, is the animal aggressive? Are you in immediate danger, sir? No, he's in danger, I yelled, probably bursting the poor dispatcher's eardrum. And I'm in danger of losing my mind with this woman. Just send someone. Police, fire department, anyone with bolt cutters and a functioning moral compass. A few minutes later, which felt like several geological epochs, a cruiser pulled up. 2 officers emerged. One, older, with tired eyes and a mustache that had seen better decades, was Officer Miller. The other, Officer Davies, looked about 12 and had that fresh out of the academy shine, his uniform so crisp it could probably cut glass. Brenda, naturally, got to them first, launching into a well-rehearsed monologue about responsible pet ownership, community regulations, the integrity of the perimeter, and my clearly agitated and unreasonable demeanor. She made it sound like I was trying to stage a hostile takeover of the cul-de-sac, using Barnaby as a fluffy Trojan horse. Officer Davies, bless his by-the-book heart, was nodding along, taking notes in a tiny, serious-looking notepad. All right, sir, he said, turning to me, his voice full of officious concern. What seems to be the problem here? Ma'am, if you could just let him speak? Officer Miller, however, just sighed. A deep, world-weary sigh that spoke of too many neighborhood disputes and too little coffee. He looked from the gleaming padlock on the gate to me, then in the general direction of the cliff. So, he said, his voice flat, your dog's down there, on the cliff, and the gate's locked by the Homeowners Association. He said homeowners association like it was a particularly unpleasant medical condition. "Officer," Brenda chirped, her voice dripping with counterfeit sweetness. "It's clearly marked. Bylaw 7, subsection C, paragraph 2. Access to common area perimeter barriers strictly regulated to prevent unauthorized ingress and egress, thereby maintaining the security and aesthetic harmony of the collective residential environment." I swear, Miller's mustache twitched. "Can't you cut the lock?" I pleaded, my voice cracking. Barnaby had let out another faint yelp, and it cut through me like a knife. "He could be bleeding out. For God's sake, it's a dog!" Officer Davies cleared his throat, flipping a page in his notepad. "Sir, destruction of private property, even HOA property, is a serious offense. We'd need a clear mandate, a direct and imminent threat to human life, or an official request from another authorized agency. As it stands, my dog is going to die while you two consult your legal dictionaries." I felt a tremor run through me, a dangerous combination of fear and fury. Brenda seized the opening. "You see, officers, his aggressive tendencies are escalating. I mentioned the recent spate of vandalism near the community notice board just last week, and the mysterious disappearance of several of my Vote for Brenda Continued Excellence in HOA Governance lawn signs during the last election cycle. I'm not saying it was him, but—" She let her gaze, full of dark insinuation, linger on me. I was going to explode. This woman was actually implying I was a nocturnal lawn sign pilfering vandal while Barnaby was clinging to a cliff. Officer Miller, to his credit, looked like he was trying very hard not to roll his eyes into the next county. He seemed to understand the absurdity, the sheer, weaponized pettiness of it all. But his hands were tied by the same red tape that was currently strangling my hope. Davies, on the other hand, was now looking at me with a new, wary suspicion, probably wondering if I had a secret stash of HOA propaganda in my garage. The situation was officially hopeless. The system, in all its bureaucratic glory, was not just failing me, it was actively, enthusiastically giving me the middle finger. I started pacing my front yard like a caged animal, which, in a way, I was. Caged by inaction, by rules, by Brenda's ironclad grip on common sense. The cops were attempting to mediate with Brenda at the gate. This mostly involved Officer Davies, looking increasingly uncomfortable as Brenda continued to recite HOA bylaws verbatim, occasionally cross-referencing with a laminated copy she'd produced from her oversized handbag. Officer Miller was leaning against his cruiser, arms crossed, watching the whole charade with an air of profound resignation. He caught my eye and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "No dice, buddy." My stomach twisted. This wasn't working. They were going to assess the situation, liaise with relevant departments, form a subcommittee to explore viable regulation-compliant options, and by then Barnaby would be— No, absolutely not. Think, Mike, think! My brain, usually a fairly reliable machine for graphic design projects and remembering obscure movie trivia, was sputtering. Who owes you a favor? Who can do something insane? Something so far outside the box that the box itself would file a formal complaint with Brenda? My gaze fell on the half-finished framework of my deck extension. The deck. My monument to suburban aspiration and Brenda's endless capacity for obstruction. It had been a battle royale. "View obstruction," she'd shrieked at the initial planning meeting, even though the only view my deck would obstruct was her direct line of sight into my kitchen window, which, frankly, was a public service. It took 3 HOA meetings, a strongly worded letter from a cousin who'd once thought about going to law school, and a veiled threat about arbitrary aesthetic enforcement and discriminatory petunia favoritism before she'd grudgingly, with the enthusiasm of a condemned prisoner signing their own execution order, approved the permit. And even then, not before making me shrink the design by 2 crucial feet and change the stain color, twice. That particular shade of cedar, she'd opined, nose wrinkled, is far too jaunty for our community's established palate. The contractors, Chad and Brad, were due any minute. They were already 2 weeks behind schedule, something Brenda also took great pleasure in pointing out every time she saw me. Maybe they had something. A really, really long ladder? Industrial-strength bolt cutters? A small, localized EMP to disable Brenda's vocal cords? Just then, their beat-up Ford F-150, a symphony of rattles and rust, rumbled around the corner. Chad, a lanky guy with a perpetually surprised expression, was driving. Brad, built like a friendly refrigerator, was in the passenger seat, already halfway through a breakfast burrito. They pulled up, saw the cop car, saw Brenda in full oratorical flight, and then saw me, looking like I was about to spontaneously combust. "Whoa, Mike!" Chad called out, sticking his head out the window, burrito crumbs clinging to his chin. "What's all the... Is that a cop car? Multiple cops? And is Brenda holding court again? Did you try to plant another lemon tree?" The Great Lemon Tree. Incident of 23 was a story for another time, a saga of citrus, cease and desist letters, and Brenda's assertion that lemons were non-native and overly flamboyant. I rushed over to their truck, words tumbling out of me in a frantic torrent. "Guys, it's Barnaby! He's down the cliff! Back of the house! Brenda, that witch has padlocked the rescue gate! The cops say they can't do anything. Do you have, I don't know, a grappling hook? A really, really long rope? Bolt cutters the size of a small child?" Brad took another contemplative bite of his burrito. "Dude," he said, his mouth full, "that's like a 30, maybe 40-foot drop. Sheer rock face. And our bolt cutters? They're for cutting rebar, not breaking into Fort Knox. What you need, my friend, is like a superhero. Or maybe one of those parkour guys." A superhero, right. If only. My mind raced. There had to be someone, something. And then it hit me. Like a ton of bricks. Or rather, like a 2-ton prefabricated luxury hot tub being delicately airlifted over a historically protected, ancient retaining wall, narrowly avoiding Mrs. Higgins' prize-winning rose bushes, all while an apoplectic Brenda shrieked about unauthorized aerial incursions and potential for catastrophic fiberglass shrapnel. The hot tub, my neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, and his impossible backyard. And the man who made the impossible possible for a price. Skyscraper Steve. My hand was already reaching for my phone. This was certifiably insane. He'd probably laugh, hang up, or quote me a figure that would require me to sell a kidney on the black market. But Barnaby was down there, and Brenda was still quoting bylaws. Desperate times, as they say, called for certifiably insane, kidney-endangering measures. I retreated a few steps from the general vicinity of Brenda's ongoing filibuster, seeking the relative privacy of my own, soon-to-be financially devastated, yard. Chad and Brad were watching me with a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity, probably wondering if I was about to attempt some sort of citizen's arrest on an entire governmental regulatory body. Officer Davies was still dutifully taking notes, though he looked increasingly like a man who'd wandered into the wrong movie. Officer Miller had his sunglasses on, an inscrutable expression on his face, but I could have sworn I saw the corner of his mustache twitch again. My thumb hovered over Skyscraper Steve's contact number. The business card he'd given me was a masterpiece of understated menace. Skyscraper Steve's extreme deliveries and unconventional access solutions. If it fits, it flies. If it doesn't, we'll make it. Below that, in smaller print, HOA disputes negotiated. Extra fee may apply. This was insane. He'll laugh me off the phone, I thought. Or charge me my firstborn. Then again, Barnaby is my firstborn, in a furry, tail-wagging, occasionally eats the mail kind of way. Okay, here goes nothing. I pressed call. The memory of that hot tub installation was still vivid. My neighbor, dear old Mr. Henderson, a man whose primary joys in life were his stamp collection and complaining about the youth of today, had decided he needed a 6-person hydrotherapy jetted hot tub. The problem? His backyard was a terraced labyrinth, accessible only by a narrow, winding flight of stone steps that even a mountain goat would find challenging. Brenda, naturally, had been apoplectic. Noise pollution, she'd declared at the emergency HOA meeting she'd convened. Excessive water wastage, unsuitability for the architectural vernacular of our esteemed community. And, she'd added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the undeniable potential for hedonistic gatherings that could irrevocably tarnish our neighborhood's family-friendly reputation. Skyscraper Steve had arrived in a battered flatbed truck that looked like it had personally participated in the D-Day landings, towing a crane that seemed to defy several known laws of physics. He was a man carved from granite and gristle, with a beard that could house a family of small birds and eyes that had seen things that would make a drill sergeant weep. He'd taken one look at the impossible terrain, one look at Brenda, who was already brandishing a copy of the HOA covenant like a vampire slayer with a crucifix, and just grinned, a slow, terrifyingly competent grin. "Ma'am," he'd rumbled, his voice like gravel being churned in a cement mixer. "I specialize in putting large, inconvenient objects in ridiculously tight spots. Your little rule book ain't a problem, it's just Tuesday. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a date with 2 tons of fiberglass love puddle in gravity." And he had. The hot tub had soared through the air, a bizarre suburban whale, landing perfectly on Mr. Henderson's patio, much to Brenda's sputtering fury. The phone rang twice, then, "Steve speaking. Make it quick. I'm eyeballing a weather front that looks meaner than a 2-headed rattlesnake in a locked outhouse." "Steve? It's Mike Henderson. From the Henderson hot tub job? Old man Henderson's neighbor?" A pause, then a low chuckle. "Hot tub Henderson's kid. Or, well, not kid. The fellow with the dog that tried to help unload the counterweights. Yeah, I remember you. What's up? Don't tell me Brenda's trying to get that tub out now. 'Cause that'll cost double, and a therapy copay for my crew." No, nothing like that," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Listen, I have a highly unconventional access situation, extremely time-sensitive. More unconventional than a 2-ton jetted behemoth over a historically protected, city-mandated 80-year-old retaining wall, next door to a woman who I'm pretty sure times squirrel bowel movements for bylaw infractions. Lay it on me, son. I've had my coffee. I'm ready for anything." I took a deep breath and laid it on him. The fall, the cliff, Barnaby's predicament, the locked gate, the useless cops, Brenda's reign of terror, the whole sorry, rapidly deteriorating mess. I probably sounded like a gibbering lunatic, but I got it all out. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear wind whistling faintly, maybe the crackle of a radio. I held my breath. Finally, Steve's gravelly voice came back, surprisingly thoughtful. "So, let me get this straight. Your pooch is playing mountain goat on a cliff that's maybe, 30, 40 feet down? And Captain Bylaw won't unlock the damn emergency gate 'cause her petunias are having a bad hair day." "That's the gist of it, yeah," I said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "And my dog, Steve, he's my best friend." "Gotcha," Steve said. "Family's family, 2 legs or 4. Now, you said you need to get down there, like 10 minutes ago. You still got that, personnel deployment rig I mentioned I sometimes use for extreme high-rise window washing, or retrieving particularly stubborn weather vanes from church steeples. My heart leapt. He was actually considering this. The bell 412. You said it was mostly for, I don't know, inspecting oil rigs in the Gulf or something? She is, Steve confirmed, and she's usually booked solid this time of month. But as luck would have it, one of them canceled. Weather down south. Freaky hurricane decided to show up early to the party. So, the 412's sitting pretty in the hangar, fueled up and raring to go. Question is, Henderson, you got a clear landing zone, or at least a hovering spot? And more importantly, you got a credit card that ain't gonna curl up and die of fright when I look at it too hard? The astronomical fee he quoted made my ears ring and my future retirement plans evaporate in a puff of smoke. But then I pictured Barnaby's terrified face, his whimpers. "I've got it," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "The cul-de-sac is pretty wide. You can hover. Just how fast can you get here?" "Where I am now, if I don't spill my coffee and the FAA plays nice, give me, say, 2 minutes after I hang up this phone." 2 minutes. It sounded like an eternity and no time at all. "Do it, Steve," I said, my voice hoarse. "Barnaby's worth it. He's probably worth more than my entire house at this point, but he's worth it." "You got it, Henderson. Operation Shaggy Skyhook is a go. Tell Captain Bylaw to hold on to her hat. And maybe her prize-winning petunias." He chuckled, a sound like rocks tumbling down a hillside, and hung up. I lowered the phone. A strange calm settling over me. The kind of calm you get when you've just agreed to something so utterly insane, so financially ruinous, that all your other problems suddenly seem quaint and manageable by comparison. I turned back to the assembled cast of our little suburban drama. Officer Miller was now actively trying to suppress a grin. Officer Davies looked like he was mentally calculating the number of reports this was going to generate. Chad and Brad had, miraculously, found a bag of chips in their truck and were munching away, eyes wide. Brenda was still lecturing Officer Davies on the precise definition of nuisance animal as per the county ordinance. Guys?" I announced, my voice carrying a new, slightly unhinged authority. "Plan B is officially en route. You might want to clear the street, all of it. And Brenda?" I gave her my brightest, most unnervingly cheerful smile. "You are really, really not going to like this." Her perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up into her hairline. "Michael Henderson, if you have called one of those dreadful drone delivery services to airdrop contraband pet supplies, I will personally see to it that—" The first faint, distant whump, whump, whump of rotor blades cut her off, and my smile got wider. 2 minutes, Skyscraper Steve had said. That was, what, 45 seconds ago, 50? Time had warped, stretched, then snapped back like an over-torqued rubber band. Every distant yelp from Barnaby carried on the slight breeze was a tiny, sharp drill bit twisting into my ear, into my heart. "Come on, Steve," I muttered under my breath, my gaze fixed on the impossibly blue, empty sky above the rooftops. "Don't let this be some kind of elaborate, expensive prank." Though, honestly, at this point, even a prank involving a helicopter felt like progress compared to Brenda's bylaw bonanza. Officer Davies, ever the professional, stepped forward, his hand instinctively going to the radio on his shoulder. "Sir," he addressed me, his voice tight with official concern, "what exactly is Plan B? You're not planning on doing anything reckless, are you? Section 12 of the Municipal Code clearly states that any unauthorized—" "Define reckless, officer," I cut him off, my patience worn thinner than a cheap t-shirt after 100 washes. "Is it more reckless than standing around while my dog potentially bleeds to death on a cliff face because she—" I jerked a thumb towards Brenda, who was now squinting at the sky with dawning horror. "Is more concerned about the structural integrity of a padlock than a living creature?" Brenda, predictably, heard that. Her head snapped towards me, eyes blazing. "I heard that, Michael Henderson. And for your information, proper procedure is the bedrock of civilized society. Without rules, without adherence to established protocols, we descend into anarchy. Is that what you want, Michael? Anarchy? Dogs falling willy-nilly off unregulated precipices? Unlicensed aviators disrupting the peace? Is it?" I just stared at her. The woman was a walking, talking argument for why some species eat their own. Officer Miller, who had been observing this exchange with the weary resignation of a man who'd seen far too much of humanity's petty squabbles, finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "Just watch him, Davies," he said quietly to his younger partner. "My gut says this is either going to be very interesting or a truly spectacular amount of paperwork. Possibly both." He adjusted his sunglasses, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Chad, meanwhile, had finished his bag of chips and was now rummaging in the cab of his truck. He emerged a moment later holding a slightly battered bag of popcorn, the microwave kind. "This is better than that time a rogue squirrel short-circuited the entire block's Christmas light display," he offered to Brad, mouth already half full. "Remember that? Mrs. Periwinkle swore it was a targeted attack on her prize-winning inflatable Santa." Brad just nodded, eyes fixed on the sky, occasionally glancing at Brenda as if expecting her to spontaneously combust. The thumping was louder now, a palpable vibration in the air, in my chest. Barnaby let out another whimper, weaker this time, and a fresh wave of nausea washed over me. "Come on, come on, come on," I whispered, clenching and unclenching my fists. This had to work. It was the stupidest, most financially catastrophic idea I'd ever had, but it was the only idea. "Is that a thumping?" I said aloud, mostly to myself, though Brenda latched onto it. "A really, really big thumping?" "Thumping?" Brenda scoffed, though her eyes were darting around nervously now. "Michael, if this is another one of your attempts to circumvent HOA regulations with some sort of percussive distraction." But the thumping was undeniable. It grew, deepened, became a rhythmic whump, whump, whump that vibrated through the soles of my sneakers, up my legs, and settled in my teeth. Neighbors, drawn by the escalating commotion and Brenda's increasingly shrill pronouncements, were starting to emerge from their houses. Mrs. Henderson from number 12, the one with the cat that terrorized Brenda's petunias, appeared on her porch in a floral housecoat, her phone already out and recording. Mr. Abernathy, the drone enthusiast, was squinting skyward, a pair of binoculars suddenly in his hand. The wind picked up, not a gentle breeze this time, but a swirling, purposeful gust that whipped leaves into mini-cyclones on the pristine lawns and rustled Brenda's prize-winning petunias with what I could only describe as violent disrespect. Her carefully coiffed perm began to fray at the edges. "What in the Sam Hill is that?" Brenda shrieked, clutching her laminated bylaws to her chest like a shield. "Is that a news helicopter? Did you call the news, Michael? That is a flagrant violation of HOA regulations regarding unauthorized commercial activity and media engagement on private community property. Section 14, subsection G clearly states." "Nope, Brenda," I said, a wild, slightly manic grin spreading across my face despite the terror churning in my gut. "Not the news. That, my dear HOA president, is my, advanced dog-walking service." And then it appeared. Cresting the roofs of the houses at the end of the cul-de-sac, like some mythical, multi-ton metal beast, was a Bell 412 helicopter. It wasn't a small, dinky news chopper. This was a serious piece of aviation hardware, painted a no-nonsense dark blue, with "Skyscraper Steve's" emblazoned on the side in surprisingly jaunty yellow lettering. It was, to put it mildly, the most gloriously out-of-place thing I had ever seen in our quiet, obsessively regulated suburban enclave. Officer Davies looked like his brain had just blue-screened. He fumbled for his radio, his voice cracking. "Dispatch, we have an unscheduled aircraft, possibly civilian utility, I repeat, utility helicopter, approaching a residential area, hovering at low altitude, requesting immediate, guidance?" Officer Miller, cool as a cucumber that had just won the lottery, gently took the radio from Davies' trembling hand. "Davies, stand down, son," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "I think this is Mr. Henderson's, Plan B arriving. Our priority now is scene management and public safety. Let's just see how this plays out, shall we?" He actually sounded like he was enjoying this. The Bell 412, with a deafening roar that probably set off car alarms 3 towns over, maneuvered with surprising grace, settling into a stable hover directly over my front yard, or what used to be my front yard, and was now, apparently, a designated helicopter landing zone. The rotor wash was incredible. It flattened Mr. Henderson's carefully tended azaleas, sent Brenda's collection of lawn gnomes, the ones she claimed were tasteful representations of whimsical garden spirits, scattering like bowling pins, and whipped my hair into my eyes. I could see Brenda's mouth moving, forming what were undoubtedly a string of furious imprecations and bylaw citations, but her words were swallowed by the thunderous beat of the rotors. Her face, however, was a beautiful, vibrant canvas of sputtering, crimson rage. It was, in a word, magnificent. From the cockpit, I saw a grizzled hand give a thumbs up. Skyscraper Steve, looking every inch the maverick action hero who'd misplaced his blockbuster movie, grinned down at me. And then, like something out of a particularly insane dream, a heavy-duty rappel line, as thick as my wrist, snaked out from the open side door of the helicopter, coiling onto my soon-to-be-destroyed lawn. My grin faded, replaced by a sudden, visceral lurch of, "Oh crap, what have I actually done?" Okay, this was it. The moment of truth. Or, more accurately, the moment of, "Dear God, please don't let me die in my own front yard," suspended from a helicopter, trying to rescue my dog from a cliff because an HOA president has a power complex the size of Texas. My internal monologue was, as you can tell, hitting its stride. The noise was a physical presence, a battering ram of sound that vibrated deep in my bones. The rotor wash felt like a hurricane trying to peel my skin off. One of Steve's crew members, a burly guy with a shaved head and tattoos snaking up his neck, leaned out from the helicopter's open door. He moved with an easy, practiced competence that was both reassuring and terrifying. He expertly, almost contemptuously, tossed down a complicated-looking harness that landed with a jangle at my feet. I stared at it. It had more straps and buckles than a medieval torture device. I'd once struggled for 20 minutes to assemble an IKEA bookshelf. This was clearly beyond my pay grade. The crewman, whose name tag read, "Rick, have a nice flight, or fall," gestured impatiently. He was mouthing something, but I couldn't hear a word over the apocalyptic roar of the Bell 412. I fumbled with the harness, trying to figure out which hole was for my head and which was for, well, not my head. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the nylon webbing. This was a mistake, a huge, expensive, potentially lethal mistake. Barnaby. I had to remember Barnaby. Rick, apparently deciding I was a lost cause, unclipped his own safety line and, with the agility of a mountain goat on caffeine, somehow half-climbed, half-lowered himself down the first few feet of the rappel line, then dropped lightly to the ground beside me. He smelled of jet fuel and grim determination. "First timer, huh?" he bellowed directly into my ear, his voice somehow cutting through the din. Is it that obvious? I yelled back, trying to shove my leg through what was clearly an armhole. Rick sighed, a sound that was surprisingly audible. Yeah, kinda. Here, lemme. He took the harness from my nerveless fingers and, with a few swift, practiced movements, had me strapped in. It was tight, uncomfortably tight, like being hugged by a very enthusiastic, very impersonal octopus. Ever done this before, buddy? Rick shouted, giving one of the straps a final, bone-jarring tug. Only in my most terrifying, sweat-drenched nightmares, I screamed back, my voice cracking with a delightful mixture of terror and adrenaline. Is it too late to mention I have a mild but significant fear of heights, and possibly of large, noisy flying machines? Rick just grinned, a flash of white teeth in a weathered face. A little late for that, pal. Rule 1, don't look down. Rule 2, keep your feet against the cliff face as you go. Rule 3, whatever you do, don't kick rocks on the dog. He won't appreciate it. He gave me a hearty slap on the shoulder that nearly sent me sprawling. And Rule 4, try to enjoy the ride. Not everyone gets a personalized helicopter rescue in the burbs. Brenda, meanwhile, was apoplectic. She was standing at a slightly safer distance now, thanks to a firm but polite suggestion from Officer Miller, but her face was still contorted with fury. I couldn't hear her over the rotors, but I could read her lips. Gross violation FAA regulations, unauthorized aerial incursion, my petunias, I'm calling my lawyer, I'm calling the governor, I'm calling my congressman. She looked like she was about to have an aneurysm, and for a fleeting, terrible moment, I almost hoped she would. Almost. Officer Miller had positioned himself between Brenda and the rapidly unfolding chaos, looking for all the world like a patient zookeeper trying to manage a particularly unruly, rule-obsessed primate. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you step further back, he yelled, his voice barely audible, for your own safety and the safety of the remaining gnomes. He was definitely trying not to laugh now. I could see it in the crinkles around his eyes. Davies, on the other hand, looked like he was about to faint or throw up, possibly both simultaneously. He was frantically speaking into his radio, probably requesting backup, a SWAT team, and possibly a priest. Rick clipped my harness onto the main rappel line with a decisive, metallic clack that echoed ominously in my ears. He gave me another thumbs up. Ready for the grand tour, Ace? Ready? I was about as ready as a turkey is for Thanksgiving. But Barnaby was down there. My best friend. My idiotic, lovable, cliff-diving furball. I took a deep, shaky breath that tasted of jet fumes and existential dread. For Barnaby, I whispered, though no one could hear me. And then, with a nod from Rick to the crewman still in the helicopter, I felt the line go taut. I took one last look at my suburban street, now transformed into a scene from a low-budget action movie, gave a weak, terrified wave to Mrs. Henderson, who was live-streaming the whole thing with a look of pure, unadulterated glee, and stepped off my perfectly manicured, HOA-compliant lawn into the churning, roaring abyss of my own making. My stomach, which had been somewhere around my throat, decided to take a quick trip down to my kneecaps. This was, without a doubt, the single most terrifying and idiotic thing I had ever done. And it was only just beginning. The world tilted. One moment I was standing on the reassuringly solid, if slightly gnome-damaged, turf of my front yard. The next, I was airborne. The ground shrinking beneath me with alarming speed. My legs, which had apparently forgotten their primary function of supporting my body weight, were shaking like two over-caffeinated Chihuahua puppies in a blizzard. My arms, clutching the rappel line with a death grip that would have impressed a crocodile, were already starting to burn. The wind, A malevolent entity whipped up by the Bell 412's furious rotors was trying its level best to rip my eyeballs out of their sockets and feed them to the bewildered pigeons circling overhead. "Don't look down, don't look down, don't look down," I chanted internally, a mantra of pure, unadulterated terror. Naturally, my eyes immediately disobeyed, flicking downwards. Bad idea, very bad idea. The cul-de-sac, with its ant-sized cars and dollhouse-like homes, spun lazily beneath me. I could see Brenda, a furious red blob, gesticulating wildly. Officer Miller was looking up, arms crossed, an expression that might have been admiration, or possibly just professional curiosity about how much force it takes to snap a standard rappel line under the weight of a panicking suburbanite. Then, the helicopter shifted, a sickening lurch, and I was no longer over my yard, but being winched out, over the jagged, unforgiving edge of the cliff. The real cliff. The one with the 30-foot drop and the distinct lack of safety nets. "Okay, feet against the cliff," Rick's earlier instruction echoed in my brain. Easier said than done when the cliff face seemed to be rushing up to meet me with hostile intent. My boots, my trusty weekend gardening boots, scraped against the rock, sending a small shower of loose pebbles cascading into the void. Don't kick rocks on the dog. Crap. But then, through the wind and the fear and the roaring in my ears, I saw him. Barnaby. He was still on that narrow ledge, a small, golden beacon of terrified fur. He looked up as I descended, his big, soulful brown eyes locking onto mine. And in that moment, something shifted. The fear didn't vanish, not by a long shot, but it was joined by something stronger, fiercer. A surge of pure, unadulterated, get my dog off this stupid rock determination. "Hey, buddy!" I yelled, my voice hoarse and whipped away by the wind. But he heard me. His tail, which had been tucked tightly against his body, gave a weak, tentative thump against the sandstone. "Hey, boy, Daddy's here. Just hang on, okay? We're gonna get you out of this, you hear me? You just took the scenic route to your morning walkies, you daft mutt." My boots found purchase, sort of. I leaned back, as instructed, trying to look like I knew what I was doing, which was a monumental feat of acting considering I felt like a sack of particularly uncoordinated potatoes. The descent was clumsy, jerky, punctuated by undignified grunts and the occasional yelp, mostly from me. I was pretty sure any professional rescue team watching would have been simultaneously horrified and deeply amused. Finally, with a jarring bump, my feet touched the ledge. It was even narrower than it looked from above, barely wide enough for me and Barnaby, and definitely not designed for enthusiastic greetings. Barnaby, however, didn't care. He let out a joyful bark, a real bark this time, full of relief and, "Oh, thank God you're here," I thought. "I was going to be squirrel food." He tried to launch himself at me, all 80 pounds of wiggling, ecstatic dog. "Whoa, easy there, big guy," I gasped, bracing myself against the rock face, my heart hammering. "We're not out of the woods yet, or off the cliff, as it were." I quickly, fumbling slightly with adrenaline-slicked fingers, checked him over. His left front paw was definitely tender, and there was a nasty-looking gash just above it, oozing a bit of blood, but it didn't look broken, thank God. Otherwise, he seemed more shaken and scared than seriously injured. He licked my face, a frantic, slobbery thank you that almost made me lose my precarious footing. Skyscraper Steve's crew, bless their efficient, adrenaline-junkie hearts, had thought of everything. Along with my harness, they'd lowered a specialized dog rescue harness. It looked like a canine parachute rig. Getting Barnaby into it while perched on a crumbling ledge 30 feet above certain doom, with a helicopter thundering overhead, was an experience I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Well, maybe on Brenda. "Okay, B-Man," I grunted, wrestling a strap under his belly, Barnaby helpfully trying to assist by licking my ear. One leg in here, good boy. Other leg. Almost there. You are being so brave, yes you are. The bravest boy in the whole damn world. I was babbling, half to reassure him, half to reassure myself. Finally, he was secured. I clipped his harness to a secondary loop on my own, then gave the thumbs-up signal to the crewman watching from the helicopter door. The line went taut again, almost immediately. "All right, Barnaby," I said, giving him a quick hug, burying my face in his fur for a second. "Time to fly, buddy. Try not to pee on me on the way up, okay?" And then, we were airborne again. A bizarre, dangling man and dog pendulum swinging gently as we were winched upwards, away from the treacherous cliff, towards the roaring, welcoming maw of the Bell 412. Barnaby, surprisingly, seemed to be enjoying this part, his ears flapping in the wind, a look of bewildered canine delight on his furry face. Maybe he had a future as an extreme sports mascot. The ascent was smoother than the descent. Or maybe I was just too numb with relief to notice. The ground, my beautiful, flat, non-cliff-like front yard, rushed up to meet us. With a final, gentle bump, we were down. Safe. Solid ground beneath my feet had never felt so good. I unclipped Barnaby first, then myself, my knees threatening to buckle. The noise of the helicopter was still deafening, but it was already beginning to lift slightly, preparing to depart. Skyscraper Steve gave me a jaunty salute from the cockpit, a grin splitting his weathered face. Then, with a final, window-rattling roar, the Bell 412 climbed into the sky and veered off, leaving behind a stunned silence, a deeply traumatized patch of lawn, and about 20 bewildered neighbors all pointing their camera phones in my direction. Paramedics, who Officer Miller had apparently called, just as a precaution, you know, for the dog, and possibly the highly stressed owner, were suddenly there, fussing over Barnaby, then me. Barnaby, ever the attention hound, was lapping up the sympathy, thumping his tail and offering his injured paw for inspection like a seasoned war hero displaying his battle scars. I was mostly just shaky, covered in dust and dog slobber, and acutely aware that I probably smelled like fear and desperation. Officer Miller approached, pushing his sunglasses up onto his forehead. That little smile was back, playing on his lips. "Well, Mr. Henderson," he said, his voice laced with a curious mixture of official disapproval and grudging admiration. "That was unorthodox. Highly unorthodox. You do realize the sheer breathtaking number of municipal codes, FAA regulations, and quite possibly international treaties you probably just bent, if not shattered." I was cradling Barnaby, who was now attempting to lick the paramedic's stethoscope. "Officer," I said, my voice still a bit ragged, "with all due respect, my dog was on a cliff. I nodded towards Brenda, who was currently being restrained from charging onto my property by a very stressed-looking Officer Davies, was more concerned about a padlock and the aesthetic harmony of dandelions. Priorities, you know?" Brenda, overhearing this, let out a shriek that could curdle milk. "This isn't over, Michael Henderson. This is far from over. I have documented everything. The noise violations, the unauthorized aerial activity, the flagrant disregard for HOA common area protocols, the reckless endangerment of indigenous shrubbery." And her voice rose to a dramatic crescendo. "The profound emotional distress inflicted upon my prize-winning petunias." Officer Davies, ever the diligent note-taker, actually consulted his little pad. "Technically, ma'am," he piped up, his voice a little reedy, "petunias don't have legal standing for emotional distress claims in this municipality. Sir," he turned back to me, "we will, however, need a full and comprehensive statement regarding the, aerial canine extraction." Chad, who had somehow managed to find another bag of chips during the excitement, wandered over, offering me a slightly squashed, cheese-dusted morsel. "Dude," he said, his eyes shining with a mixture of awe and second-hand adrenaline. "Epic. Totally, unbelievably epic. That was like something out of, like, a movie where The Rock has to rescue a really fluffy puppy." Brad just nodded sagely, still speechless. Triumph, exhaustion, and the dawning, chilling realization of the bureaucratic Everest I was probably about to have to climb all swirled together inside me. But Barnaby was safe. He was here, licking my hand, thumping his tail, completely oblivious to the chaos he'd unleashed. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. Then, one of my neighbors, a quiet, unassuming guy named Kevin, who I think worked for the local paper or something, pushed his way through the small crowd of onlookers. He was holding his phone aloft like a trophy. Mike, this is incredible. I got the whole thing. The argument with Brenda, the helicopter, the rappel, everything. This is going viral, man. You're a hero. Dog lover defies HOA tyranny with daring helicopter rescue. How's that for a headline? Oh, crap. Viral? Me? I just wanted my dog back. Now I was going to be helicopter dog rescue guy for the rest of my natural life. My brief moment of triumph was rapidly being overshadowed by a new, media-induced wave of existential dread. Brenda, hearing the word viral, looked like she was about to explode. This day just kept on giving. Later that afternoon, after the paramedics had bandaged Barnaby's paw, superficial, thank God, mostly scrapes and a bit of a sprain, after the cops had taken my lengthy, rambling, and probably largely incoherent statement after the last of the curious neighbors had dispersed, no doubt to upload their shaky phone footage to every social media platform known to man, a semblance of quiet finally descended upon the cul-de-sac. I was in my kitchen, nursing a very large, very stiff drink. Barnaby, sporting a jaunty blue bandage and an air of profound martyrdom, was snoozing contentedly at my feet, occasionally letting out a soft, sleepy sigh. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of quiet that usually precedes a very large, very unpleasant bill. My phone pinged. An email. Subject line, Invoice, Operation Shaggy Skyhook, S, Steve Extreme Solutions. My stomach did a slow, queasy roll. Okay, Mike, I muttered to myself, taking a fortifying gulp of my drink. Time to face the financial music. Remember, he's worth it. He's worth every penny. Even if it means eating ramen noodles for the next decade and selling a kidney. Possibly both kidneys. I opened the email. The invoice was impressive. In a "this is more than my annual salary" kind of way. There were itemized charges for aerial mobilization, specialized personnel deployment, hazard pay included, canine extraction rigging, fuel surcharge, urgent dispatch, and something vaguely ominous called atmospheric disruption compensation. My bank account wasn't just weeping, it was holding a full-blown operatic funeral for itself. Then, I scrolled down to the bottom. There was a P.S. Noticed the, enthusiastic HOA representative on site. Figured she was adding a certain je ne sais quoi to your stress levels. So the standard Karen annoyance and bureaucratic obstruction premium, usually an extra 25%, has been waived on this one. Consider it a professional courtesy. Heard from my sources she was a real piece of work on that Henderson hot tub install, too. Some people just like to watch the world adhere to bylaws, huh? Next time she tries to block that deck extension of yours, just give me a call direct. Got a crane that can gently encourage property line adjustments. If you catch my drift. Kidding. Mostly. Hope the pooch is okay. Steve. I stared at the screen, a slow grin spreading across my face. He waved the Karen fee. Skyscraper Steve, the grizzled jet fuel-scented angel of mercy, had waived the Karen fee. There was justice in the world. Small, incredibly expensive, helicopter-assisted, fee-waiving justice, but justice nonetheless. He waived the Karen fee, Barnaby, I announced to my sleeping dog, who merely twitched an ear in response. That means, well, it means we can probably still afford kibble this month, and maybe even that fancy orthopedic dog bed you've been eyeing. My phone pinged again. This time it was a text from Chad. Dude, just saw you on the local news website. You're famous. Chopper Dad saves Pooch from Cliff of Despair. They're calling Brenda the Baroness of Bylaws. Listen, man, Brad and I were talking. After that display of epic world-class dog-saving badassery, your deck extension, labor's on the house, seriously. Materials are still on you, 'cause, you know, lumber ain't cheap. But the work? Free. Consider it a sheer awesomeness discount. You earned it, bro. I blinked. Free labor? Skyscraper Steve waiving fees? Maybe this day wasn't a complete financial catastrophe after all. Maybe, just maybe, there was a silver lining to being publicly humiliated while dangling from a helicopter. Or at least, a slightly less bankrupt lining. A few days slid by. The initial media frenzy died down, though Chopper Dad and Baroness of Bylaws seemed to have stuck in the local lexicon. My cul-de-sac, however, would never be quite the same. Things were different. People waved when I walked Barnaby, who was now sporting his blue bandage like a Purple Heart and milking every ounce of sympathy from adoring passers-by. Kids would stop, point, and whisper excitedly, "Look, Mom, it's Dog-Copter Dad." Even the mailman, a stoic gentleman who usually communicated only in grunts and package slips, gave me a knowing, almost respectful nod the other day. It was weird. I felt like I'd accidentally become the main character in some bizarre, low-budget superhero movie. Suburban Man, Origins. I was out for our morning constitutional, Barnaby trotting proudly beside me, on a very short, very secure leash, you can bet your bottom dollar, when I saw her. Brenda. She was by the infamous emergency access gate, which now looked like something guarding a Cold War missile silo. It bristled with new locks, at least 3 more padlocks, a heavy-duty chain, and what looked suspiciously like a bicycle U-lock. Beside it, she was in the process of erecting a new sign, much larger than the previous one, hand-painted in furious red letters. Absolutely no dogs, no drones, no unauthorized recreationalists, no helicopters, especially Bell, 412S, and positively no unapproved fun of any kind. Violators will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the HOA Charter, municipal ordinances, state law, federal aviation regulations, and possibly international maritime law, if applicable. Trespassers will be composted. Okay, maybe not that last part, but it was pretty close in spirit. She straightened up, dusting off her hands, and saw us. Her face, which had been set in lines of grim determination, tightened further. For a moment I felt that old, familiar flicker of apprehension, the Pavlovian response to Brenda's mere presence. But then, something amazing happened. It just wasn't there anymore. The fear, the intimidation, it was gone. I'd faced down a 30-foot cliff, dangled from a helicopter that cost more than my car, and successfully extracted my best friend from the jaws of certain doom, or at least a very uncomfortable afternoon. An HOA president, even one as formidable and bylaw-obsessed as Brenda, just didn't hold the same terror for me anymore. She opened her mouth, probably to unleash a fresh torrent of regulatory vitriol. "Brenda," I said, my voice calm, even, dare I say it, cheerful. I offered her a bright, friendly smile, the kind of smile that probably made her fillings ache. Her mouth snapped shut. She looked flustered, almost confused. "Michael," she finally managed, her voice stiff like it was being forced out through a very small, very rusty pipe. "Lovely day for it, isn't it?" I continued, gesturing vaguely at the clear blue sky. Perfect flying weather. Say, did you notice the local squirrel population seems to be significantly down around here lately? Much less chattering. Wonder why that could be. I gave Barnaby a conspiratorial wink. He, of course, just looked thrilled to be included in the conversation, thumping his tail enthusiastically against the sidewalk. Brenda just stared. Her eyes darted from me to Barnaby, then to the sky, then back to the heavily fortified gate. For a glorious, fleeting second, I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear? Respect? Indigestion? It was hard to tell. Then her expression hardened again, but the usual fire seemed dampened. Without another word, she turned on her heel, her back ramrod straight, and marched back towards her pristine, petunia-filled fortress of a house. I watched her go, a genuine chuckle escaping my lips. Barnaby looked up at me, head cocked, as if to say, "Did we win, Dad?" "Yeah, buddy," I said, ruffling his ears. "I think we did." Later that week, the estimate for the deck repairs came in. Turns out, rotor wash from a Bell 412 hovering at 50 feet is not conducive to the long-term structural integrity of freshly laid joists, but Chad and Brad, true to their word, only charged me for materials, and even then, they found a supplier with a sudden overstock. Skyscraper Steve sent me a Christmas card in June with a picture of a Bell 412 wearing a tiny Santa hat, captioned, "For all your festive and non-festive emergencies." Life in the cul-de-sac settled into a new kind of normal. Brenda still patrolled, of course, her laminated bylaws ever at the ready. But there was a subtle shift in the power dynamic. People smiled more. They lingered on their front lawns. Mr. Abernathy even accidentally flew his drone over her prize-winning rose bushes, claiming unforeseen magnetic interference. No one said anything, but there were a lot of knowing glances exchanged at the next block party. As for me, I'm still Chopper Dad. I still get the occasional weird look, but mostly I just get smiles. And Barnaby? He's fine. A little more cautious around cliffs, perhaps, but otherwise his usual happy-go-lucky self. Though sometimes, when a plane flies overhead, he'll look up, a wistful expression in his big brown eyes, and let out a soft little woof. I'm pretty sure he's plotting how to get himself stuck in the town water tower next, just so he can get another ride in the chopper. I might need to invest in a bigger fence, and maybe some therapy, for both of us. But mostly, when I look back on that insane, terrifying, ridiculously expensive day, I just remember the feeling of Barnaby's wet nose nudging my hand when I finally reached him on that ledge. And you know what? It was worth every damn penny. Even the atmospheric disruption compensation, whatever the hell that was.